Hi everyone, and welcome to 4DMethod, the 4D and Wakanda user group. Today is June 7th, 2016, and welcome. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about 4DMethod. We'll get some 4D news from Jim Sobczak and Brian Young. We'll have some Wakanda news from Ricardo Mello. We'll do the 4D iNug e-digest with Ed Hammond after it. And then we'll take a look at some of the recent Knowledgebase articles, and I'll take that part. And our special topic for today is the TestTakers SAT Prep Management Company and 4D system. Frank Pomilla will be handling that, and Alan Reed in New York City. We'll have some general Q&A, and we'll talk about our next meeting, where we'll see a code analysis component from Open Road Development. Without further ado, my name is Brent Raymond. I organize the 4DMethod, 4D and Wakanda user group. You can go to our website at 4dmethod.com, and if you have any questions or suggestions on how to make things better or need any help with anything, go to email us at 4dmethod@gmail.com. 4DMethod is what we're trying to do with 4DMethod is to combine efforts with other user groups around the world and to bring together a scattered community of developers and users of 4D and Wakanda. We stream our meetings via Google Hangouts to allow people to participate in a live meeting from anywhere in the world, which is what we're doing right now. We record the meetings and presentations to be viewed again or shared with others. All of the previous meetings and special topic demos are currently available on our website or our YouTube channel. And we really try to provide fresh new content and exposure for all the regional user groups. And I'm going to hand it over to Jim Sobczak in California, who's the VP of Sales and Services for 4D Inc. Let's see. There you go.
Great. Thank you, Brent.
Yep.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Brent and Ed, as always, for organizing these meetings and for inviting us to participate. San Jose here has been a hub of activity for the past few weeks. As most of you know, the Sharks are in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Warriors in the NBA Finals. Yes, a primary election today, and everyone's trying to woo votes in Silicon Valley. So it feels like the eyes of the world are upon us right now. And it's been very busy here at 4D. For the next few weeks, and for the last several weeks, we've been reaching out to our 4D V13 customers. I'm sure most of you know that 4D 13 upgrade pricing will end in just a few weeks on June 30th. So please take advantage of your V13 licenses, upgrade them to V15 before that upgrade pricing goes away on June 30th. Feel free to contact your sales rep for any quotes or anything you may need. Current R releases, I know Brent does an excellent job of discussing these, so I'm not going to get into them in too much depth. V14, of course, V15, sorry. V15 R4 was released on May 26th, and we're really excited about that one. Hope you're all using that and had a chance to look at some of the new features in that version. V15 R5 went into beta last Thursday. You can get that on the forums, forums.4d.fr. Among the many new features in there is, of course, the preemptive processes for the 4D language that we discussed at the summit, and Brian will mention the summit replay of videos that are available now to summit attendees, and one of those, of course, is Laurent Hainaut's session on preemptive processes. So I hope you all take advantage of the work we've done editing the videos, making the videos in the first place, and revisiting those excellent sessions. So summit wrap-up, Brian, again, we'll have more to discuss about that, but personally, I wanted to thank you all for filling out your surveys. They're very useful to us and to the 4D speakers who were there. We're still doing summits. We've got a Montreal DevCon this month. Next month there is a DevCon in Australia and another in Japan. So we're still doing our road shows and summits as we planned. That's all I have for today. I'm looking forward to seeing the demo of Test Takers, and I'll pass it back to Brent. Thank you, Brent.
Thanks, Jim. Let's see, and we have a bit more news. The videos from the Summit 2016. Going to hand it over to Brian to talk about that.
Yeah. So can everyone hear me? Okay. We've had some technical difficulties.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. So yeah, since the last meeting, we've had the Paris Summit, and things went off really well there as well. The feedback we got for both summits was really great this year, and as much as I'd like to take credit for having good organization, I think it really is a testament to how good the product is right now and how many great features are coming out. People are really excited about multi-threading, or I should say preemptive multi-threading, and about objects and many of the other features that are rolling out now. So for the Summit Replay, we just started it for some customers in Europe last Friday. For everyone here in the US, today we started rolling out the first 3 videos. We have plans to get those out much quicker than we have in the past, and get more videos out each time we send you a mail. So we expect every couple weeks you'll be getting at least 2, probably 3 or 4 videos in those mails. So we think they are going to be pretty helpful. You'll find all of the materials from the summit. Anybody who attended the summit will be able to log in and get those materials off of KB. That's what I have to say. I hope you guys had a great summit, everyone that was able to attend, and look forward to seeing you guys next time we do one.
Thanks, Brian. And yeah, I can certainly say that I really enjoyed this year's summit, and it was good to see all the other developers in the community in Portland and Paris. And by the way, thanks for all the positive comments that I got about the 4DMethod user group. Just this is your user group, so get involved and share what you're doing with the community. There's a lot of neat projects and applications and uses of 4D and Wakanda that people are doing out there. So everybody get involved and jump in and join us. And as Jim mentioned, we had recently the 4D v15 R4 version released. A few details about that. We have the ready-to-use interface introduced with the 4D Write Pro released, which is 4D Write Pro, of course, is the new 64-bit version of 4D Write. That has quite a lot of new features and powerful implementations that you can do with it. A new 4D code tag for the 4D tags capabilities. This allows you to copy basically code directly out of a method and put it into a web template and process it on the fly with process 4D tags. That is also very useful, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot of new things that you out there are going to be doing with that particular tag. We have new list box features. Every version they're just cranking out new list box features. That is clearly the way to go with interfaces now. New functionality for the ability to suspend and resume transactions. We have also a new read-only application deployment option for this is useful when you're deploying your application in an environment where you can't write to the disk very easily, if I understand correctly, and this helps you work through that environment. For instance, if you don't have admin rights on all of your client computers. Another really great feature for distinct values. There's a new parameter where it will actually show you the number of occurrences for each of the distinct values that for that command in the language. A lot of us have wrapped our own processes or our own methods for that functionality, and now that's available directly in the language, which is really great. And finally, one of the things that I wanted to mention was there's also a new system variable for error formula. So if an error happens, unthinkable, I know, but if an error happens, it will actually return to you the formula that the line of code essentially that was processed and created the error, and then you can log that line of code with the error in your error logging. So all great things. Really nice to be able to take advantage of those earlier with these R versions instead of having to wait until V16. So stay tuned for more great features coming out of 4D. And back to Ricardo Mello to talk to us a little bit about the latest Wakanda news. I'll hand it back over to you guys.
All right. First, I want to say how disappointed I am with Jim that forgot. How could you forgot that we have the 100 years American Soccer Cup being right now being done here and so on there. I went to the stadium yesterday. 70,000 people. 70,000 people in the Levi Stadium.
We have soccer fans?
Apparently. It was not even Mexico playing. It was Argentina, and it was fantastic. So for a Brazilian guy, that's don't tell my friends that I went to an Argentina game. Anyway, so back to Wakanda. Wakanda, I think we have a slide somewhere, but if you want to show it, is there? Yes. Look at that. Wakanda was picked by Gartner as a cool vendor for 2016. We cannot be more excited about that because this is going to be a huge exposure for us. So Gartner selects just 10 players to be in their cool vendor, and we're one of them. And we're pretty excited. It's based on the all change that we have been showing lately here, and just good things are going to come from that. The team is super excited about the news. I hear that some new features coming sooner actually than what we thought. We have a new release come end of June, and also we went to the NGConf, which is the biggest Angular event in North America and probably the world. There's about 1,500 developers in the place. And we were very glad that we made an impact. And we were the only sponsor there that was ready already for Angular 2 and Ionic 2. So if you go to our wakanda.org, you're going to see that we are already ready for Angular 2 with TypeScript, with new ways of building up your app, with some packaging with Webpack. So pretty exciting things, and we're just sailing right now. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, congratulations again on that cool vendor award that you guys got. That's great, and I'm sure it'll get some more people taking a look at Wakanda and seeing how much neat stuff you can do with it, and how quickly you can build up a web application. So next we have the 4D iNug eDigest, where Ed Hammond discusses some of the recent topics that have been talked about in on the NUG. So hand it over to you, Ed.
Thanks, Brent. We are going to make some changes to the Ed Digest of the NUG. Based on feedback we've got from the summits and discussions with people, we're going to go a little bit more into depth on just a couple of topics that we found interesting, and then I'll have a list of other things that people can discover on their own with nav links that will give you the whole thread. Obviously, coming out of the summits and with version 15 and a lot of the implementation of objects within 4D, there's a lot of discussion on how people are going to use these data structures to help them solve problems. The most interesting thread that I found over the last couple months was one entitled Table Design, Splitting the Table Up, started by Cannon Smith. And there's a healthy discussion of pure relational options with a highly normalized structure. A lot of advice on using automatic relations to control joins or query across those table relations. Set field relation was a command option that was brought up by Miyako, and it's always good to go back and refresh your memory or investigate commands that have been added or changed from previous versions, and I think this is one based on the discussion. I think everybody's guilty every now and then of falling into old habits while coding. We like to use the commands that we've always used, setting automatic relations on or off, true or false. The moral of the story is to know your programming environment, and this command can give you much more granular control over the relations and behavior. Olivia's summit session on flat table versus traditional relational versus object-based was part of the discussion, and that is an excellent session. If you have access to the materials, please go and review that. There was much discussion about the hybrid or the object-based approach, including surprising speed and flexibility to add new data points when needed without altering your structure. They also talked about limitations when there's a new request to say sort on selection based on an attribute, or to report on a particular attribute within an object. A case study was presented with leaving a traditional query editor, ad hoc queries and analysis of saved space. Bottom line here is you must analyze your own data and your application needs to find the correct solution. And if you're going to go through a big change, are you going to come up with a wow factor where people say, well, if you've done all this work, where's the result? Is it going to have a big result? So if there's not so much to be gained for it, why change your approach? I think one of the quotes that I found within this thread that summed up quite a bit was, I'm all but genetically unable to understand how data can be so unstructured and still be maintained, queried, and etc. efficiently. And Kirk Brooks lended a sympathetic response explaining the basics of NoSQL data versus relational, and he's written quite a bit about that on the NUG, and I think it's good to review a lot of his posts on the subject. The question was posed, do we need to document the structure of our 4D objects? And I think that's really up to you and how you use them. Just remember, there could be a 500-pound gorilla following you to maintain your code, so program accordingly. Near the end of the thread, there's a discussion on a decision to go back to the relational model, and instantly some roadblocks arose, and there were suggestions on how to get around those items. David Adams piped in, and as always, he's prolific in his analysis of things. He gives a good rundown of data structures in 4D now and in historical perspective, including subtables and the various options for normalization within 4D, using SQL joins, automatic relations, etc. And in true David Adams fashion, he gives details on using data structures in programming for application control and messaging and so forth. Following that, there was a discussion, is there no query selection by purpose? Kurt Brooks. Olivier said, well, you can link query with query by attribute. Miyako, Welsh Harris, and David Kane took up the discussion and they took it in a different direction with a discussion about query across relations, sequential queries, using sets and using the command describe query execution and get last query path to analyze your methods. Again, that goes back to my comment earlier about you need to go back to the documentation and know how these commands, added commands, can change the way you look at your applications. Following on the objects theme, Kirk Brooks had another thread on query names with an index field versus object field. He starts the thread with implementing a 4D object approach to collecting names on individuals, how they can have advantages and disadvantages over some previous approaches, including keyword indexes based on an entry in a text field, fuzzy searching using SoundX or metaphone encoding, and distinct fields for names. The dilemma is how to structure your object. Kirk put forth 3 different approaches for what he was trying to accomplish and got feedback on all of those. His third option, which was putting things in an object array, was sort of shot down when Olivia said, well, there's no way to query on that third approach. But you can always make a feature suggestion. And his quote is, a customer case is always nice for the spec team. You'll find links for these threads and a number of others, including set timer -1, D3 examples with data built from 4D, form object manipulation, talking about NoSQL, 4D's C object field, and an actual example by Kirk Brooks, a rant on web areas by Ed Hammond, delete list problems from Tom Dillon, how do I set the scroll of a web area from Kirk Brooks, and how do I autofill passwords and the web area from Mitchell Schiller. These links will be on the 4DMethod database shortly following our meeting here today. There were a couple of announcements from different people. A new version of data browser component from Olivier Fleury, and version 1.8 of the 4D v14 and 15 code analysis component from Danny Boubien. I believe if I butcher anybody's name, see me at the next summit, I'll buy you a drink. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. And as Ed mentioned, check out on the 4DMethod website under the eDigests tab, where he provides links to all of those discussions. There's just a gold mine of information out there in the NUG, and takes a lot of time to read all up on it. So thanks, Ed, for digesting it down to your talk here. Again, another gold mine of information, the knowledge base, and I was really thrilled with, in particular, this one knowledge base article, integrating facial detection recognition in 4D, where basically OpenCV and Python are used in a mashup to do facial detection in images from within 4D. That is, I would have to say, it's, if not my favorite knowledge base article ever, it is in the top 5. It is something that's really, really well done, and the OpenCV is such a powerful library for analyzing images, and the way that it's hooked in through Python is very elegant, and I encourage you all to go out and check it out, and even if you can't use it, it's just the way that it's tied together is done very well, and I'm sure, given that there are so many other nice Python libraries out there, that the same kind of way of tying in Python into 4D for other functionalities would be of use to you in some other manner. So everybody check that one out. That's a wonderful tech note. Also another good tech note, working with audio files in 4D. That's manipulating the audio files and the tags for MP3s and whatnot. So you can actually create your own and create and manage your own audio database. There's another tech tip on resetting the 4D debugger window bounds, and reference to another Knowledgebase article about how to reset preferences for other specific windows in 4D. That is a really handy thing. That's actually new, how those preferences are broken out in current versions, and you can reset preferences for, say, the Explorer window or the debugger, or basically any of the 4D windows. You can specifically reset the prefs for those in case they're coming up a little bit funky. And also another tech tip on QuickTime images. In recent versions of 4D, the strict reliance on having QuickTime installed on client machines has been removed. However, if you're still displaying images, say thumbnails, that were generated with QuickTime previously, then if you don't have the preference switched on to still support QuickTime images, then those will come up with a placeholder thumbnail, and so either you'll need to re-enable QuickTime support, which is something you actively have to do with coding, or you will need to convert those older pictures to newer formats. So lots to learn in the knowledge base, and really a great way to see what's possible with 4D programming. So without further ado, we're going to get a special demo from the TestTakers SAT Prep Management company in New York City. We have Frank Pomilla here, who's the president and founder of TestTakers. A little bit of history about Frank. From the beginning, Frank has excelled academically. He was valedictorian of his high school class and went on to get a bachelor's degree in economics from Princeton in 1983, and then immediately thereafter started TestTakers. Since then, he's instructed nearly 1,000 students himself, and he's been a site director at TestTakers for over 3,000 more. He has a stellar career in SAT test taking himself, getting perfect scores on the SAT over 30 times. And for his contributions to underprivileged students in the field of SAT preparation, he's been honored by the STAR program, which is Success Through Academic Readiness, and the Let's Get Ready program. We also have Alan Reed, who's a site director for TestTakers, who has had experience in the finance industry as a hedge fund investment analyst, and who is a graduate of the Stern School of Business at New York University with degrees in finance and international business. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys and hear more about TestTakers.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Nice intro. However, I think, as we'll quickly discover, I wish he hadn't touted my academic strengths, because when it comes to things technical, I'm about as low on the totem pole as you can get. And I think probably what's of most interest to the people here is how a small company like ours, and it's small, we have 9 full-time workers here, none of whom is really technically a tech person. Alan is our closest, and so the tech duties fall on him, but he has other responsibilities here too, and would be the first to say that dealing with anything that involves technology is a sidelight for him, not a primary aim for him. So yeah, so I feel funny having heard Brent's intro because you'll quickly discover I'm inept when it comes to anything technical. However, I think that the program that we have with 4D has been really helpful to us and really easy for us to use, and for even this not so technically savvy person has been really easy to use as a user. By way of introduction, TestTakers is involved in SAT preparation. Brent informed me that we'd have somewhat of an international audience, so for given that, I'll just quickly describe the SAT. It's the American test for college admissions for those schools that have selective admissions and that want to see a student's record before admitting them. The test is given internationally, but it's primarily used by American universities. It's a little different from most of the tests the kids here take in school because it's considered to be a reasoning-based test. That's been chipped away at recently. There's been a recent big change in the test, and it's getting less and less reasoning-based and a little bit more curriculum and knowledge-based, but it's still a more reasoning-based test than the tests most students will encounter in school. We've been using 4D since, wow, I think about 1994, when our technical person on staff at that time selected it as the best database for us to use to keep our information, and we've been on it happily since then. We've been able to do a couple of things that, from where I'm sitting, for a small without a technical bent, that are fairly sophisticated. Alan will run you through that since I can't. But one of them, for example, involves an application to our service of some of the advanced statistics that have been used in baseball. For those who follow baseball, you probably know there's been an explosion in advanced statistics in there. We've been inspired by one or two of those to create some new statistics to determine the effectiveness of our teachers. And that's sort of a nifty thing that we've been able to do using 4D as an application for what we do. I think I'm at this point going to turn it over to Alan to start to actually walk through some of the primary features that the 4D, we call it Billware, the original programmer for our version of it, for our custom version of it, is a friend of mine named Bill, and he's long since gone from TestTakers, although still a friend, and so we call it Billware in his honor. But it is morphed and changed greatly since the initial version that was created 22 years ago. Okay, so let me turn it over to Alan to run through some of the features of Billware that we've got.
All right, hey everybody. I'm just going to turn the screen around. Let me know if you guys can see this. Oh, is that coming through here?
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. If you minimize the browser window, then that'll the tunnel vision will go away. Hopefully, there we go.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to run through a pretty basic case where we take a student from what we call a prospect. As you can see here, there's a lot of windows. We're not really going to go through all of them. We keep a lot of data from different test sets, schools, and personnel records. But we're going to start when a student contacts us. We create what's called a prospect record, and we create that from scratch. So if someone, let's say, Brent Raymond, is going to contact us.
Oh no, I'm not taking the SAT, am I?
I don't know. You might have to. So we're going to say, Brent, what school did you go to?
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. All right, that's not really going to work here. Let's just say you went to this school.
All right.
And then we're going to fill out the rest. Let's say Brent, even though he's in 10th grade, he takes care of his own affairs. He called us. So he called us himself, and we're going to fill in his info here. Let's just choose a random state, city, and zip. Okay, and you fill in all this information for the students that we get to the cell phone. Okay, so we'll take that. That's the basic information that we'll usually get. These fields, sometimes we get them all. And we want to know what primary course he's into, and these are all course IDs. So we'll say he's in the 2016 class, spring, and a site that we call Scarsdale. So that'll be our initial record. We go to contact history, and we'll add some of the details of the call. So it has automatically filled in time, date, and who handled it. In this case, ACR, that's me. So I'll say, great call. He just needs to check his schedule. Okay, and that might be something where we say, hey, 4 out of 5 stars. We want to know a rating for that so that we can understand when we check back how likely is that student to sign up. Okay, so that's our initial prospect call. If and when Brent calls back and says, hey, you know, I'm good to go, we can say, great, enrolled. Okay, so we have Brent enrolled in the class, and right from the prospect record, we can say, yes, he's enrolled, and create the student record. Okay, so from there, a lot of the information is going to transfer over. He's in the spring Scarsdale course. Here's the info that we put in. Scores and attendance, which we'll get to in a second. Payment, Brent's such a nice guy. Free class for him.
Thank you.
And that's the student record. So from there, we move through each class. We will assign him first to some teachers. I hear this Alan guy is pretty good. I'll have him twice. 2 different periods, by the way, for the 2 subjects of the SAT. And we would begin week by week, obviously not all at once, filling in these classes. And plus would indicate to us that Brent attended the regular class. Let's say for the 4th week, he attended the makeup class. Here we have prior scores. Brent, pretty good student. Great scores there, 1,400 out of 1,600 coming in as a high-scoring student. We'll try to get him that perfect score by the end of it. Here, what we're looking at is what we call a progress report. This is something that we will mail out to the parents to let the parents know exactly how the students are doing in paper. So these are different check boxes that the director would check off before sending this form to the teachers to write a report. So let's just say we're going to assign this to Alan, and Brent needs to work on some of the graphics questions in the reading and really a lot of math. So Algebra 1, Algebra 2, plug in, back solve. Math is clearly his weakness here. What we can do here is we're eventually going to send a Google form to the teacher so they can do this remotely. But
the teachers are off-site; they're not at our main office.
Right.
So sending it off to them is very helpful to us.
Exactly. And not only that, the teachers are going to be getting a string of students, so they'll have 10 to 12 students to write this for per site. So this keeps all the information in one place. As the director, I can write a little note here that says, "Hey, Alan, make sure you hit on the techniques." So this will be pushed over to the record, and then Alan can look at that and say, okay, great. He wants me to really talk more about the techniques in the math. Cool. Okay. We will go to what we call Google Docs Sync, and for this site, I will push over to alan.c.read. Again, this is all me. I do need to open up this browser. And that will send over a Google spreadsheet. Okay, and I don't know if that's going to cause too much of an issue here. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Okay, great. So a lot of these other students have had information already inputted, but let's just go down to the Brent example here. So you see now as the teacher I can say, okay, well, he wants me to make sure you talk about the techniques, so I can say, Brent, really needs to run what we call plugin and backsolve. These are two techniques, and obviously we would have a lot more writing going on here, but let's just say he really needs to do that. Great. So after I close this out, as the teacher, I can tell my director, hey, I've finished the progress reports. Why don't you go ahead and pull those? So, oh, this is awesome. Just get this restarted here. And obviously the director would be sending this report to all of the teachers. So if you have 10, 13, 15 teachers, obviously this is a big time saver compared to the way we used to do it, which was, I mean, literally sending FedExes of hard copies of all this stuff over. So huge help. We can go to our Google Docs link and say, well, what course was that? Spring Scarsdale? Okay, we're going to pull that record, and that will allow me to download all of that information here. Oh, okay. Let's do it again. Sorry, guys, for some reason, running into a little bit of an issue with that push-pull, but hopefully we'll get that back up and running. All right. So I'm going to pull up the student records for that site, and again, our site ID is S16. That's PR for spring, SCR for Scarsdale, that location. And we can see, okay, student Brent Raymond. Great. Now everything is filled out. As a director, I can now see the report. I can proofread it from here. And we can also generate what eventually will be sent out to the teachers, which is this progress report. Okay, and we'll see, okay, great, here, fold this all up, send it out to the teachers. Brent's a great student, needs to work on plugin and backsolve. And that's something that will generate. So the teachers, so the parents know, at least from us in writing, how the students are doing. And this will be generated halfway through the course. So that's one piece. When we get to the end of the course, you know, we'll want a final record, final scores from Brent. So let's say, wow, he did really well. He got that 1600 perfect score, terrific. You know, and we'll record that we got that today. Terrific. So at the end, really the way we measure how the course has gone, aside from word of mouth and overall atmosphere, is we judge the teachers on two things. One is a teacher evaluation, which we give halfway through the course and at the end of the course. That allows us to assess how the teachers are doing based on the students on 10 different categories. So that's basically like a GPA out of 4.0, and that's one piece. The other thing is obviously how did the students do? How did the scores improve? And that's where we do have another thing, and Frank was talking about this earlier. We call this the POP monitor, and POP stands for points over par. One of the main things that is a little bit hard to decipher is if a student has a 60-point increase in a subject, is that good or is that not so good? If a student comes in with a low score, say a 300, 60-point increase may not be so great, but if you're coming in at a higher level, then certainly that's going to be great. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things we do in the course is we separate the students according to their incoming scores. So each class will be done separately for verbal and for math, and they'll have similar scores, all the kids starting in a given class. This makes it hard to assess how effective a teacher is at raising scores, because there is a relationship between the student's incoming scores and the expected increase that student would have. So not that long ago, we decided to start using all the data we have, which is literally tens of thousands of data points over the start of the company. Brent mentioned that I had site-directed 3,000 students. That was personally site-directed. TestTakers itself has, at this point, worked with, I'm just going to guess, about 30,000, 40,000 kids. There's a lot of data that we've got that we hadn't been using. So we created, we used that data and started to create least square fit lines to see what the relationship was between incoming score and expected score increase. And by the way, for whatever interest this is, that it's an inverse correlation, pretty solidly, pretty clearly inverse correlation, where the higher the starting score, the presumably less room for improvement the student has, and the harder it is to raise those scores. So in order to normalize different teachers, one who may be teaching a high-scoring class, one who may be teaching a low-scoring class, we started to look at what the expected value of score increase would be given the students' incoming scores for each teacher, and then how the students actually performed, so we could start to see how many points they got over what we call par. And this was for those who are fans of Sabermetrics in baseball, this was roughly inspired by wins above replacement, which is a great statistic that has come to the fore in baseball. And it was the first time we were really able to evaluate teachers effectively based on the score improvements they got, not just based on the subjective evaluations that the kids give them. We consider both to be very important metrics for the teachers, but this one we are now able to utilize. And obviously, this one really requires computerization, whereas the other, while it is encapsulated in the billware that we use, it was not necessary so much to use it for that. But this one really requires it, and there's automatic updates. I think every time we close out a billware or close out of a record, so the least square fit line will slightly change based on new data, and teachers' evaluation will also automatically update based on any new data that's input about student scores after the course.
Right. Exactly. So, you know, for example, and this is based on, by the way, the old scoring table, scoring system, which, you know, if you had a 500, for example, as your incoming score in reading, and we had 327 of those who reported final scores, the improvement was about 61 points there. So then we can compare teachers on all different types of metrics here, and you know, obviously green is good. You can sort this by reading par and determine, hey, you know, these guys are doing really well here. Towards the bottom, maybe not so much. Need to work on your improvement. And so this allows us to evaluate teachers, you know, without really taking into account, wow, the kids really love this teacher. I'm hearing a lot of great feedback. However, is this teacher really putting in the work in the classroom to raise scores, or are they just kind of joking around in the classroom? And so that gives us two ways to really evaluate, and I think both are pretty important. I'd say, Frank, I don't know if you also echo this, but the score improvement part probably the slightly more important part of the two.
Yeah, almost equal importance with a slight nod towards score improvement as the most important criterion for assessing teachers.
So yeah, that's basically would be a student's journey from beginning to end here, you know, of the course. And after we get the final scores, obviously we want to know how they're doing. We do keep some information on college and grad school to you know, just keep them sort of in the fold. But yeah, and I think that's where we'll end here.
Okay. Great. I mean, that's very interesting how you're able to use a sort of a baseball perspective to judge your teacher's effectiveness for raising the students' scores in each of the subjects that they teach. And how long did it take to basically build that out in Billware? Is that something that you developed over a number of years, or is that something that with you know, one of my fondest things about 4D is, you know, once you have a nice idea like that, the interface and the data is really easy to get into the application, into the hands of the users right away. And what was your experience with that?
That was pretty simple, actually. I think the hardest part there was the conception, you know, the conception of the idea. But from conception to, boy, I don't remember that being a particularly tricky process. I think the slightly trickier one, which would make sense, was that Google push and pull that Alan was showing before, since it required a seamless interface with Google. Mm-hmm. But even that one, I would say, was not very troublesome in implementing. I think also it was skillfully handled by a skillful programmer, a fellow who's I didn't realize was a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech, but very, very skillfully handled, and therefore pretty problem-free. I feel like the Google one, every now and then, I feel like maybe Google is changing some of its sort of internal stuff, and then we'll see a problem, and then we'll have to tackle it, or not will tackle it, but it'll be tackled from the technical end. But no, pretty seamless, I would say. Basically, both those advanced applications. Yeah.
That's great, and thanks for the shout out there. Do you have any other baseball-inspired statistical approaches, in your mind that you'd like to implement as well, or?
Well, that's a great question. I need to brush up on my Sabermetrics. I did actually go to college and interact with Michael Lewis, the fellow who wrote the Moneyball book that then got turned into the movie. So I have a very indirect connection to this whole baseball stats world. When I initially created POP, points above par, I actually wanted to follow it a little more closely to the baseball stat, which isn't so much against an average, which is what I'm doing, but more against what they call replacement. What would it be against sort of a marginal teacher? They find this useful in baseball. It's a very clever, I think, invention. So I've considered doing that, but the definition of what a marginal teacher is from a statistical basis, I think, is hard for us to do. No, but I think I should go back and start looking a little bit more at some of those baseball stats, because I do think there are other applications that could probably be utilized along those lines.
There are some things that I think one of the main things we've been working on for the last, I would say, year is transitioning from one test to another. So the SAT actually went through a complete overhaul and went from a 2400 scale with 3 subjects to a 1600 scale with 2 subjects. So a lot of our more creative ideas about evaluating teachers was put on hold. But I think you can see things, that generate off of what POP is to isolate for certain things. We didn't really go into this specifically, but there's a custom field here, so you can actually search for specific things. And so one thing I do know is about sabermetrics and all that is kind of like the Parks effect, which is, hey, you're hitting a lot of home runs, but you're doing this in Citizens Bank Park or Coors Field, something like that. How is that really affecting your numbers if you come over to a different place? Are you going to be as effective? So we can do things like that. We can look for how students are performing in the fall versus the spring. We can talk about subject, and that really does help us because we want to know of the overall score improvement. Where's that coming from? Is that mostly coming from one subject versus another? Are we getting great score improvements with low-scoring kids, but not so much with high-scoring kids? And this will help us a lot, and even to determine the right fit for teachers, because we have a lot of specialists out there. So if you're on playing a lefty-lefty matchup, something like that, we have some teachers that are very good with low-scoring kids. Better patience, better slow explanation, stuff like that, whereas others excel with taking high-scoring kids and bringing them to the next level. So this really allows us to do stuff like that.
At this point, we're limited not by 4D and Billware, but by our own imaginations as to what the relevant variables are. The more variables you start to slice and dice, then the less it is a reflection on the teacher, and there's sort of a right balance between accounting for Alan calls it the park effects, which is really the baseball term, and for us might be something like we've noticed kids from the top high schools exhibit a score improvement above and beyond what would be expected from their incoming scores.
Right.
Well, if a teacher disproportionately, for whatever reason, is teaching kids from that high school or from those top schools, maybe that is what's influencing that teacher's average improvement or POP, and not something else. But again, actually, I'm glad Alan showed the fact that we can customize this, because it really is doing everything I could imagine, and the proof of the pudding of that is I haven't yet scratched the surface of all the things it can do and all the tests that I can look at in order to determine a little bit more about what influences score improvement.
Yeah. This is definitely one of the examples I think about when talking about business intelligence, because so many companies have databases like this, and as you mentioned, have a long history of data and functioning of their business hidden in their database. and they haven't sort of been able to leverage that information and use it to inform their future business decisions. And I think that this was a very clever way to have that kind of power from your data. And I think most of us, most systems out there could use more of these kind of features. Technically speaking, if anyone is wondering, the Google Sync is done also with a mashup of Python libraries, a GData library, and the pop monitor that we were just looking at uses a web area for its graphing, also the Google Charts API. But other than that, it's all pure 4D. So yeah, so I'll turn it over to let's see if there's any questions from the field. None from online, but from anyone in the group here. And you, if you can see, I'm gonna set my overtake the sharing back again. But go check out TestTakers at ttprep.com. Does anyone have any questions for our presenters today?
Hi, Brent. Jim Subcheck here. Thank you very much for the presentation there, Frank and Alan. That was pretty awesome. What a great app you guys have there. So just curious, are all of your end users, your customers, in the U.S.? SAT being primarily a U.S. Test, obviously, but do you have customers outside of the U.S. that are using this app?
We do everything in person, so the courses have to be physically located elsewhere. We do happen to have a far-flung course in Singapore. A fellow used to work for us and was moving out there and was hoping to start something there. A good number of the Singapore students look to go overseas for university, and that explains how there's a market there. For a short while, their national university also used the SAT as its admissions criterion. They don't anymore, but we do have a course in Singapore that's up and running, and that's using this 4D billware.
Interesting. Thank you.
You know, there's a question on the group chat from Bob Miller. It says, how do you create the charts with the regression line?
Yep, that is done using a web area, so where you're able to construct a URL, in this case calling the Google Charts API. So you put all of the parameters in the URL, and then it displays the chart for you within that web area. There's a very early implementation of web areas when they came out, yeah, it's there's the Google Charts API is really great. It allows for some very interesting visualizations of data. Maybe not quite D3 level of flexibility, but it gets you most of the kinds of charts that are most common, including, you know, the one with that we were looking at, where each of the dots are actually, you know, they're sized according to the frequency of students that had that range of gain in their scores, and then the average lines and the regression line, all of that, and the coloring, all of that is able to be controlled through the creation of that URL for the Google Chart API. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, our next meeting can be, you can check it out at 4dmethod.com/schedule. Will be again, as Ed said, if I mispronounce anyone's name, I owe them a beer. I'll buy them a beer anyways. But Donnie from Open Roads Development will demo his code analysis component for 4D. We've checked that out with checked that out with the museum. Is it not presenting? Okay. Can everyone see that slide?
See the next meeting slide.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, strangely enough. Yeah, so we're looking forward to that component, demo of that component, and that really helps to take a deep look into your code and has some functionality for management of your code base. Again, calling for speakers for the following meetings after that. A lot of you had some nice ideas when I spoke with you at the summits. Please let me know if you'd like to present on any of these dates. So thanks so much. Any other questions? As usual, all feedback is appreciated. You won't hurt my feelings. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.